Alright guys, so I wanted to do a video about the Holley Terminator X software. There's a bunch of videos out there as far as how to use the handheld, how to set it up, blah blah blah. That all works really well. The handheld's pretty great. I have no problems with it. It at least gets the car up and running for you. And set up correctly, it could for the most part, tune itself. Any good tuner is going to tell you though that there is no such thing as a self-tuning computer, especially when you don't have a tuner setting up that self-tuning computer for you. Really self-tuning is basically open and closed loop. When you first start up, you're on open loop. Once it gets up to temperature, depending on what your parameters are, you're on closed loop. Closed loop is going to set you to where, it's going to make fuel adjustments, it can make timing adjustments, all that kind of stuff. The one issue is the Terminator X does not learn anything with timing. So it's whatever you set it up to be. So if you set it up to be 40 degrees all the time, it will be 40 degrees all the time. Now, yes, there is not correction, but it doesn't learn. So that's where, yes, you can get things started up with the Terminator X, but there is some, things that need to be addressed once it's up and running. And, to really get it up to optimum running conditions, it should at least go to a reputable tuner to get tuned. Someone like myself, there's plenty of guys out there that are familiar with the Holley software that could really, get in there, set it up for you, and go from there. But I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to do just a basic walk around of the Holley Terminator X software, which also pertains to a lot of the Holley HP and Dominator stuff as well. The software is pretty much basically the same between all of them. There's a couple little differences here and there. You obviously have some more ins and outs on the HP and obviously even more on the Dominator. Going further with it, what I'm going to do is show you what I'm talking about with the timing table, kind of address what my issue there is, and then from there, show you what to do to be able to set up the flex fuel, and then also set up a time-based or just an on-off switched methanol injection system. Basically, I'm using this as a tutorial to go along with the big blower setup that's a video before this, because basically that car is running on a 5.7 with a Mad Dog blower on it, and it has flex fuel compatibility. So I started the tune on 93, and then it will be switching over to flex fuel, and then also it's going to be running methanol injection on top of the blower to cool that charge before we start tuning it. So I'm going to walk you through how to set that stuff up and kind of go from there. That way it's a little bit easier to do it rather than just pointing and shooting and just figuring out what happens. So stand by, and we're going to switch to my laptop screen and we'll go from there. Alright guys, so this is the system parameters screen of the Holley Terminator X. As you can see, what we're looking at here is a base file for a 6.0. It's set for a 3-bar map sensor. And we're going to come in here, we're going to change some injector data. I'm just basically showing you a couple things. So basically, when you first open it up, it's going to be like a black screen. Well, here, I can just show you. It'll look like this. Come up here, hit engine parameters, and that'll give you this screen here. Okay, so if you load a LS base tune, it's going to look like this basically out of the box. We're just going to come down here and we're going to pick a set of Deca 60s, and then you can just come in here and put these at 80. So let's say we're doing a tune on Deca 80s, which is actually, we're talking about the car with the blower on it. That's what it had in it when I started. I'm now actually switching it over to Snake Eater 1500s because we were out of injector on it, and we'll get around to that in another video. I'm going to show you guys how I ended up changing it and how to view the log file and all that stuff. But we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. So what I just did here is we set these up. Now this is a set of 80 pounders, which basically what was in that vehicle. You come in here, we're going to set the ignition type to 24 tooth, and that's under ignition parameters. There are 1-wire knock sensors in there. And then here's your firing order and all that stuff. This is where you're going to set your scales up for all of your sensors. Make sure these are right. If they aren't, what you'll notice, and these all look like they're okay. Yeah, okay. So we'll get back to these in a little bit because I'm going to show you guys something else I encountered with this. And then this is your basic ins and outs under this tab. This is where you're going to set your fans up, and if you're running a secondary fuel pump. So I'm going to circle back around to this one right here, the secondary fuel pump setup. Closed loop learn. This is what I was talking about with you can set it up to learn the fuel for you to get things running. I dumb down these parameters quite a bit. Basically, if this thing has something going on, like after it's been tuned correctly, if it has to make a 50% compensation, there's something going on. And that's where, you got to go in there and figure out what's going on. I tune in open loop. So when I'm tuning, I turn this off right here. And none of this stuff even matters until we go and start tuning it normally. But again, I'm not going to get too far into the tuning process. It's not really something that I'm interested in doing for this video, so to speak. And there's not really, like, there's a science to it, but there's no hidden magic in tuning. I'm not hiding anything here by trying to, just say like, hey, I turn the closed loop off and I tune in open loop. It makes it easier to tune an open loop because you don't have the ECU sitting there making compensation adjustments around you tuning. And then this one's for your inputs and outputs. Basically, it tells you what you got going on for inputs and outputs. We're going to close this up. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about with the spark tabling. So this was a 6.0 tune that was originally set up for running the internal 1-bar map sensor. If you want to change the map sensor, you come in here to sensors, you hit map, and then I have a Holley 3-bar on this setup, so I set it for the Holley 3-bar. And then that's where you would, just make sure everything's set up right with that, and then you go with the map sensor. You can come in here, you can set up the coolant temp sensor, the manifold absolute temperature, the oil pressure, and also the fuel pressure. Nothing really big and, beneficial to really look at there. If you're already navigating in and around, you should be able to figure this stuff out pretty easily, so I'm not going to get too far into it. So when you use the handheld, what I'm getting at here, and I changed the colors here. I didn't really like the factory red and black and whatever. It just kind of wasn't my thing. I like something that kind of stands out a little bit more. So once I turn the table on, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. But anyways, so when you go in and you initially set up the base timing tables on this, what happens is you're going to be set up for a simple table. So you're going to set your idle, you're going to set your cruise, you're going to set your wide open. This was for an NA setup. The way it populated, and then you're going to come in here and you're going to say, well, you know what, I want to have at max boost, which that car is going to run about 14 pounds. I want to have 16 degrees. Now, anybody who's familiar with tuning is going to look at this table down here, which is not operating off of this right now, but is going to look at this table down here and go, whoa, there's some issues there. So I'm going to turn this on to 2D table and show you what's wrong. So right here, 105 kPa is 5 kPa above atmosphere. Atmosphere, when this thing's key on engine off, it should sit around 100 kPa relatively. It can have a little bit of a variance one way or the other, but it should basically sit at 100 kPa. So anything below here, this point down, is going to be what you would see on a naturally aspirated vehicle. Okay, 36 degrees of timing is pretty high. For this would basically, if you hit the throttle at 2,000 RPMs, you'd basically run this line out right here for wide open. 36 is pretty heavy for an LS. I don't really ever see them go up that high, but that's where we'd be running for naturally aspirated. Now, if you know your P's and Q's around the inside of a timing map, you would know, okay, anything above that, I should be pulling timing out. This number right here is 14 pounds of boost. At 14 pounds of boost, it is set to run 36 degrees of timing. Now, let me just say right out of the box, if you start with a pre-populated Holley HP, Holley Terminator X, predetermined map that you're plugging in there, this is a whole nother story. It does pre-populate all these numbers out for you. For the map sensor that you're setting up with. it has a little bit difference of a discrepancy on the way it cuts this down and does the timing map for you. What I'm mainly concerned with is when I started with that this blower car, this was my timing parameters. It went from 0 to 100, okay, on the scale over here. I went in, I set the timing correct, or I set the table incorrectly by selecting the correct map sensor over here, and this is what I ended up with, what you're looking at right now. And that's my issue is, you know, up to basically like 20 some pounds of boost, we'd be running 36 degrees of timing, which anybody who knows anything knows that's way too much. So what I'm going to do is we're going to switch over to the tune that I'm actually working on for this car. It's not the exact one out of it, but I kind of pre-populated one to show you guys what I'm talking about. And we can kind of go a little bit further. We're going to get a little bit into the tuning aspect of things. You know, I have a specific way that I do it. Other people have a specific way that they do it. I'm not telling you how much timing you should run at 14 pounds of boost or 20 pounds of boost or anything along those lines. I can tell you what, I've tuned a ton of turbo LSs, and every one of them is happy at a different spot. It depends on the cam, it depends on the head, it depends on just about everything, really. So, you know, there's definitely tuners out there that are going to tell you, oh, 14 degrees of timing, 14 pounds of boost, that's what you want to run. You know, I've seen setups that want to run 20 degrees of timing on 14 pounds of boost. It all comes down to finding that correct part of timing, and there's a whole nother aspect of that, and we're not even going to get into that right now. But so this is the timing map out of that car. Basically, it's running about 40 degrees of timing under cruise, 18 degrees under idle. I actually, this is, like I said, this isn't the exact timing map, but this is the one I started with, and I think I have it at like 12 degrees of timing at idle, so it sounds a little cooler. But where we're going to start at is right here. This is 7 pounds of boost. Okay, at 7 pounds of boost, we're running 22 degrees of timing. At 14 pounds, we're running 17.8. As you can see, basically, you know, you're cruising that thing, you know, you're probably going to be around here in cruise, you're going to be 34, 36 degrees of timing. You're going to whack on that throttle. It's going to come like this, up through, build boost, hit, you know, up in this area and run out at 14 pounds. Not exactly sure what we're going to run that car on yet. We haven't gotten there. There's a couple little issues that I had with it when we first started, and we're going to kind of have to like dive a little bit deeper into it. But, you know, just to kind of give you an idea, this is a basic rundown of where I would start. What I would probably actually do more than anything is when I would go to first do my timing or my pulls on this thing, I would hit control and then left arrow, left arrow. What that's going to do is it's going to take my timing out. So that took me down 5% to 16.1, and then we'll go 2 more, and we're at 14 degrees at 14 pounds. Basically, what I'm looking for there is I have a setup where I'm low on timing. I can come in, do a couple runs, make sure my fuel's good, and then I can come in and just take me right back to where I want to be. You know, do another run now, make sure everything's okay. Add another two clicks, and basically what I'm doing is I'm hitting control and right arrow to come back up. And now we're back to where I started. That's what I would do just to get this thing going, to figure out where my happy spot is. That doesn't even touch upon the fact that we have some base fueling that needs to be adjusted too, probably. So normally what I do is I put that base timing in where I'll pull that 4 punches out of there, and I will go and I will set the fuel up, and then I will run a little bit further out and see where we're at on the timing. That's basically it for the timing side of stuff. You know, like I was saying, the big issue I have here is, you know, if this is set up for a naturally aspirated setup out of the box, it is going to do some weird stuff to you that could potentially, you know, let's say you get all happy and you're like, I'm going to go drive my car. Well, you know, you go and like, you just be like, I'm not going to blow it up on 7 pounds. Well, 7 pounds at 36 degrees of timing, you will blow it up, especially if the fuel's all kinds of crappy. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to pause this for a second, going to move some stuff around here. I'm going to show you guys how to do the flex fuel setup, and then I'm going to show you how to do the methanol injection setup as well. Alright guys, so I am now going to explain to you how to do flex fuel configuration. First thing you're going to do, I already have all this stuff set up, so I'm going to kind of just walk you back through it. You're going to click the enable button to enable number 1 input. You're going to set your digital frequency in for putting a name on it, flex fuel, then you hit the drop down box and you get all this stuff in here. You're basically going to do a digital speed frequency. And then it'll be, you know, it actually won't give you this. I already have it set up, so that's why it told me. And it's using it for a couple different things there. So then next thing you would do is you would hit configure. You're going to hit GM flex fuel. You can set this gauge up if you want to, but you don't have to. I don't even use this. I just kind of drop down this, set it up, done, boom, you know, wherever. So next thing you're going to do, and you're going to be like, oh, I should probably click where used. Well, if you click where used, it's not going to know where you're using it. It's going to say it's not being used anywhere, yada, yada, yada. So it's kind of, there's two separate ways here to do this, but I'm going to start with one way. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the define IO pin map. You're going to click that, and this guy right here will be right here. Don't get confused thinking like, oh, I should click this and like try and do stuff, and then nothing's happening. So basically, when you first come in here, you're going to have your unassigned inputs sitting here. AC kick will actually be down here, and flex fuel will be up here. Flex fuel is a frequency. Just make sure it reads that. On this, it's set up as A4. You're going to drag and drop, and boom, you're done. Make sure you verify what these pins are on your I/O plug to make sure you got stuff going the right spot. If you got it backwards, it'll make all kinds of weird stuff happen. So there's your flex fuel configuration. The next thing you're going to do is you need to set up a 1D table for it. I already have it set up here. You're going to hit table. You're going to come in here, and you're going to put a name on it, enable the table. You're doing a fuel multiplier, and your x-axis is the flex fuel setup. So it'll actually pre-populate this for you. And then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pre-populate what you want the increased flow to be. So basically, you know, keep in mind if you're tuning on E10, that this is going to automatically add fuel in on you by doing it this way. This is the way the GM configuration is. That's the way I like to do it. You know, so I come in and basically at 100%, 43 is a very good, you know, percentage to start out with. Highlight this, put 43 here, put 0 here, right click, and hit fill row values. And it'll fill this up for you, and then you got your parameters set on a scale for the flex fuel, which puts you 80% is about 34% of fuel flow multiplication. If for whatever reason you got something weird going on, when you go in and tune it on pump, make sure your pump tune is correct, and then go in here and get everything the way you need it to be. So here's your pump tune, and you're going to go, oh yeah, everything's great on gas, and then you're going to switch it over to ethanol, and you're going to be like, man, I'm stupid rich, like, you know, I'm rich the whole way across. Well, okay, if you were good here, you know, don't go start pulling fuel out of your volumetric efficiency table. Come in here, go to your 1D table, and set it to where you can pull out a little bit of fuel. The computer's smart enough to figure out if you did your volumetric efficiency table correctly, it will set things correctly for you, and you should have a very good sliding scale for fuel on there. So, you know, maybe 34 is a little too much for your setup. You know, maybe it's not enough. So, like, you know, let's say you were wide open throttle at 12.8 before, you know, you need to convert that over to lambda and working at that in that aspect. Or, you know, you can do it where you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to shoot for 12.8 on ethanol. Or not 12.8, sorry, 11.8. Wow, 12.8 would be a little too lean for this setup. But yes, you're going to shoot for 11.8. Let's say you do a pull and you're seeing like, you know, 12.4. You can take this and add 2% to it. You know, just do small changes, and basically you can just come in here. You know, I would normally start from about 20%. Just highlight up. If you hit Control and then the right arrow, it'll take the table up 5%. If you hit Control and the left arrow, it'll take the table down 5%. You know, basic, easy, you know, stuff for you to do to get things going. The thing to keep in mind is you really shouldn't have to make a large change here. It should be pretty close if this is right. You know, I don't know exactly where I'm going to end up with the car that we're talking about here for this video, but, you know, that's kind of where we're at. So this is all set up. It's ready to go. You can add in some other stuff here if you want to, whatever the case may be. You know, that's basically it. Now, the next thing you would also know, especially if you're familiar with HP tuners or any of the other setups where they use a ignition timing offset, you need to set up an ignition timing offset table. How you would do that is you come into 2D tables, hit a new one. I already have this set up, but you're going to come in and you're going to set up a flex fuel offset. You're going to enable the table. It's going to be a timing offset based off of RPM and map is the way I did it. And what you would do is you would just come in here and you're like, you know what, like I have, you know, X amount of throttle I want to add, or X amount of fuel I want to add 5% in wide open. Or maybe you're like, man, it's a little sluggish down low and you need to add 5%, you know, when it's cruising. And so this will, not 5%, 5 degrees. So this will make that happen for you where you'll have, you know, an additional amount of timing added to it. You know, if you have any kind of tuning background, you know, this is where you're going to want to maybe look at like HP tuners and see how GM does it. That's a good place to start, you know, to get that stuff set up for you. 5 degrees is quite a bit, but I'm just kind of throwing some numbers here. The thing you're going to want to do is you're going to have to set up how this table is activated. So you do advanced enable, and this table will activate when flex fuel is above 40%. You can have it at anything, really. Normally when I tune flex fuel, what I do is I try to get everything out of the system and I will tune it on straight whatever I get out of the pump. So like 80, 85%, somewhere around there. And then the last step of my tuning process is I will put some pump in it and see where I end up. I usually try to shoot for E40. It's a good set in the middle. You know, the guy made some great songs too. So like I like to usually shoot for E40. And when I do, that's when I'm going to check to make sure that my timing offset doesn't make anything weird happen. So like if I go and I tune this thing and let's say my peak timing on pump was 17 degrees, I'm adding 5 now. I'm going to make sure that adding 5 degrees of timing on top of 17 for E40 doesn't end up with some kind of mess. And that's just kind of something to check out. Now you can come in here and you can make this that it just, you know, you can make it 60 for all I care. Basically once you're above, you know, about 40–50%, you're already in 100 octane range, you know, and you're not going to have any kind of timing issues that are going to hurt you. If the motor's happy with that kind of timing, it's happy. I've had motors already where they don't want anything. You know, you're going to be coming in here, you're just going to be setting this at 0. Again, this is not, I'm not publishing this video to show you guys how to tune specifically. This has nothing to do with the theory of tuning. Like, yes, this timing table I showed in the video it would be a very good, you know, timing map to start out with, but it's not what, you know, you would start. It's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm not trying to teach you guys how to tune or anything like that. I'm trying to show you how to direct yourselves around this and also what to look for so you don't have any problems. So right now I'm not even going to do anything with this. This would be something that you would possibly build once you start getting rolling on tuning your car or truck for that matter. The other thing that you might need to set up is you might need to set up some parameters for the timing pull under heat, and that's something I'm going to get into a little bit later. But for the most part, you know, this is the stuff you need to do for setting up flex fuel. Once you have it set up, you can go and just double check, make sure you have it here, and then, you know, what you're going to end up with is if you go to here, you'll be able to see once you set this stuff up, which I'll show you, how to view what the flex fuel is, and we're going to get into the meth pump as well. But that's basically it for this part of it. All right, so now for the next one, methanol injection. There's 2 ways to do this one as well. I mentioned earlier that in the, where was it actually, base input and output, you can do fans, pumps, and air conditioning. We're going to get rid of this guy so it's no longer there. Now, technically the methanol is a secondary fuel pump. You can turn on secondary fuel pump. You can have it turned on by TPS percentage, RPM, and manifold pressure. Just make sure that when you do this, it doesn't do something stupid, because right now this pump will turn on at anything, which would suck. So basically you key on and it's just going to start spraying everywhere. But you come in here and, you know, do whatever you want. You can go 10% on the throttle, 1500 RPMs, and the manifold pressure, let's say it has to be, 100 kPa. For Justin's car, when I was tuning it the other day, I had all of this stuff set for 0, except for engine RPM I had set at 2500. What I'm actually going to end up doing with his car is this instead. So we're going to turn this back off. Oh, by the way, I have to show you on the pin map where to do it. So now you have second fuel pump. You're going to have to come in here and put it for output 3, which is B10. Now, keep in mind, if you are going to try and run any more stuff, you are now out of shit. There's nothing more here for you to do. One thing you could do is you could get rid of electric fan 2 and run just a tripwire for electric fan 1 and 2 on a relay pack. So basically, both fans are controlled by one output, and that's it and done. Boost solenoid's here because I have the boost thing up. We're not even doing boost solenoid on this, but it is what it is. So now you have a meth pump. You can come in here, you can go, okay, B10 is going to be my secondary fuel pump. On Justin's car, I'm actually running both fans, so this is how his setup looks. If you go and save this and write it and all that stuff, it's going to give you a thing like, hey, you have boost solenoid set up and you're not using it. Well, yeah, that's fine, because we're not using it anyways. The other ones here, can't do anything with. You can try and do whatever you want, but it just doesn't work doing anything for you. You can also view the other stuff in here. If you ever have a question like, oh, I need to know what one the knock input 2 is. Oh, it's A21. Or I need to know where the map input goes, A23. They're all here for you to look at. Same thing with injectors. And then you can also look at the LCD. So anyways, back to here. This is set up, ready to go. You could definitely, you could run a methanol injection fuel pump now. But I'm going to show you another way. This is the way I'm actually going to run it on Justin's car, because it's not being used as a boost control situation. It's being used as a cooling thing. I want it to run more on a duty based. So what I'm doing is I set up a output under here for the meth pump. It's pulse width modulated. You can also do ground, but it's pulse width modulated. The connection for it is J1B3, and it is already enabled. And then you would hit the configuration here, and the sensor input triggers above 1000 RPM. So basically, it will turn on above idle. And then you can set up secondary deactivations, whatever you want it to be. But you can also have multiple other input triggers if you need. But basically, if the thing's above 1000 RPMs, it will turn on. Now, you can get into this table and do pulse width modulated setup. What you're looking at here is I did map versus RPM. Basically, if it's cruising, it's just going to kind of lightly mist into that thing to try and lubricate it and keep it cool and stuff like that. The moment that it hits 105 kPa, it's going to turn that pump up to 50%. Anything above 105, it's just going to ramp it into 100. Seems to work pretty good. I'm going to do a little bit of testing with it actually tomorrow and figure out if it's going to be something that actually works for me or not. But pretty basic, setup here. It's going to be a lot better for what I had going on. Basically, what I had to do was, with it turning on just at 2500, it was kind of just making stuff go all over the place, and I had the closed loop learn chasing its tail. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a little bit of stuff with the closed loop learn, kind of where I set stuff up, what I want to do once it's fully tuned. So in the closed loop learn, what I normally do is I have this table that it can make adjustments at a very minuscule rate. So like 50% is a huge fuel adjustment, both positive and negative. A factory ECU can do 25%. That's normally what I set this to. So this is map based. You're going 0 to 39 here, so on and so forth, up to 300. And then you also can have it at at RPM based on this side. My big suggestion here is in this area here where it's idling, take this table and only set it to maybe 5 to 10%. So you come in here and just hit 10. Reason being is if you have a big cam, the wideband, can kind of end up chasing its tail a little bit. This is where a seasoned tuner is going to get in there. He's going to get to where he's going to start working on something for you, and look at it and go, oh, you know what? Like, this thing's so cammed up, it looks like it's reading a lot leaner than it really is, because it kind of doesn't fire the best at idle. Like, if you have a huge cam, closed loop can really chase its tail when you have something really big, especially depending on wideband placement. So you don't want to have this thing sit here and go, and let's say the long-term fuel trim, so to speak, goes to 50% out, and then you're like, man, it's just really dead, like right off of idle, it's just dead. Well, yeah, it's going to be, because you're going up to 1750 right here, and you're still, you're pulling 50% of the fuel out of it. Also, just keep in mind, if you were ever like, oh, you know what, I need to be able to add more than subtract, you can do that in a manner like that. It doesn't really ever work that way, so you never would really want to do that, but you could if you wanted to, for whatever the hell reason you wanted to. There's other parameters you can set up here. Usually I will set the minimum temperature for closed loop at 140. That's what the factory ECU is. The RPM to enter closed loop, you would just usually set it at like 500. You wouldn't want it to be in closed loop, when it's under, basically you start the thing up and it kind of just bubbles around. You don't really need to turn this one on, but it's just what it is. And then you can actually have it set to go to open loop if it's at, let's say, 90% throttle. Which would be, you don't want it making any changes if you're up here in wide open throttle. Which, like, for the most part, if you're up here with wide open throttle anyway. So that's kind of, as a tuning standpoint, whether or not you want to make that adjustment or not. So it's really all that I have for you today on the Holley setup and adjustments on these particular things. I wanted to kind of just give you a quick little rundown here on the gauges. Basically what I have here is this is the gauge setup for the basically to view your log, what you're logging on the ECU parameter wise live, and then when you're actually logging, you could click this little clipboard here and it will start logging for you. But if you want to edit any of this, so we added a couple things in here. So what you need to do is you need to come in here and you need to pull in and put out what you want. I like to use fuel tuning, learn tuning, and ignition all up on my screen there, so I can see what's going on. So you would come in here and you would look for each one of those that you set up. So somewhere in here is going to be flex fuel, and that's what we're looking for. All right, so flex fuel's already on there. What you can do is you can just drag this down so you can tell what your flex fuel percentage is, and you can tell what your meth pump drive is as you're going. By logging these, what you're going to end up with is by having them pre-populated here, what you're going to end up with is it will log these parameters for you. And what you're going to end up with now is, you can see here, number 2 fuel pump. I had it on for when I was tuning the other day. Now it says disabled, so it'll never even show up. Fuel learning is under flex fuel here, and then ignition, for whatever reason, didn't populate for me. That's weird. Probably because I have to be... Oh, there we go. So now I have fuel tuning, the transmission I was looking at because I wanted to make sure what my temperatures were. I also wanted to check my what gear I was in, all that fun stuff. I want to see what's going on here on the learn tuning side, if I have it in closed loop. And then fuel tuning side, we have our commanded status, our target AFR, our estimated VE, and the injector pulse width and the fuel flow. I also have over here the RPM, our ignition timing, the timing versus air, timing versus cooling, the map, the base timing, and cylinder 1 timing correction. Now this was what I was looking at the other day, and this was the very last thing I wanted to get into, was the cylinder 1 timing correction. And give me 1 second, I'll go a little bit further with that. And then here's the 2 I just added, flex fuel and meth pump. So basically what it's going to tell me is what my fuel percentage is here and what my duty cycle of the meth pump is. As you can see, These are going to be your gauges. I set up a big flex fuel gauge for me here so I can see what's going on as well if something weird does happen there. So cylinder 1 timing correction. What I'm having this logged for is I want to see if there's any timing corrections going on that are based on what's going on with temperature. With a big blower setup like that, you want to make sure that you don't have too much timing, because I was seeing IAT temperatures go up into the 170s the other day. So what you want to do is you want to come in here and you want to look at this guy right here. And what you end up with, which is always really funny to me, is this is not your coolant temperature parameter. Okay, negative 40 to 999, no way. Same thing with timing versus air temp. Now, let's say you just came in here and you pre-populated these inputs to whatever you want. Like you just come in here and you were like, you know what, I'm going to make this 200 on the manifold air temperature, and then it goes in and it will, basically you can just take these. Well, it kind of already did it actually now that I'm looking at it, but it puts a taper to it. What you don't realize, so let's say you come in here and you pull this one out. Okay, this isn't actually 181 degrees. What I want to show you next is what it actually is. So we're looking at the manifold air temperature. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come over here, okay, and there's the sensor. You're going to make sure you have the right one, and then you're going to come up to the, where is it here? It's under one of these. Oh, it is under right here. You're going to want to copy this table. And then you're going to want to come back to well, we can just do it this way. So now we look like the same way we did before. Now look at what my issue is. We were at 181 degrees before, but because these are predetermined numbers based off of the manifold absolute temperature, this table here only means something to you, not to the computer. The computer knows this is box 1 through whatever amount of boxes are here, and it's going to go, okay, I'm working in box 5, you know, or wherever we're at for temperature. And if you have it pulled out with what you thought was 181 degrees, and if you have it pulled out there at 181 degrees, it's pulling 9 degrees. It's actually pulling 9 degrees at 120 degrees of temperature. So the issue I ended up with the other day was I didn't even look at that table. I went in and made some adjustments, and I was at the wrong spot, and it was pulling timing when it was at 100 degrees. Very quick and easy to mess up, and it's very easy to fix. But it's something I kind of want to go over to show you guys, because it would be very easy for anybody else to do the same thing I did. So basically make sure that whatever you have here for your axis on the manifold absolute temperature and also the coolant temperature matches what you have underneath the sensor scaling and warnings. Okay, so any of these adjustments here are going to be at the same spot. So same thing with the coolant temperature. It should go negative 40 to 260. If you're running a special sensor with any of this stuff, you need to make sure that those parameters match everything that you do. Most of the stuff matches up, but for whatever reason, you know, I noticed that issue with the timing maps, and maybe it's something I'm just missing. I'm not sure, but you know, it just was something that I had going on there. But that's basically it for the Holley Terminator X. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment in my comment section. I can add some stuff in another video. I will probably at some point get into a little bit more informative stuff for tuning on this, but you know, it's pretty basic. It's very easy to use, you know, for a novice tuner. To get this all set up and to bring it to a tuner and basically just have it fine-tuned on the dyno is very easy. It's just there's a couple things where with any software, it's nothing against the Holley whatsoever. It's just this is a hot item right now. I see it being very easy to screw a bunch of stuff up. And it's like that with any standalone. Like, you know, I've been doing standalone tuning for about 12 years now, and being able to get any of these standalones like
kind of screwed up and whatnot is very easy. Basically, like I said, it's very easy to get kind of lost, and I wanted to just kind of show some of these parameters in here and go from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and like I said, if you have any questions, comment below. Thank you.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and any other information you're needing or whatever, just like and share my channel, and hopefully I can continue to help you guys out in the future. Thanks for tuning in.